Welcome back to Rolando Estacado. My name is Rolando, and for today's episode, we have a first. One of our subscribers, his name is Ray Tirona, was able to connect with me, and he happens to also be a weapons designer, specifically around Tomahawks. He had the opportunity to review the Winkler R&D series of Tomahawks that I put together, and we got to talking a little bit about his designs. And after a bit of communication, he accepted my invitation to have his products reviewed on my channel. So what I have here today is something very special. We have the Multo, Tomahawk, Multo. And he also sent me the Yokai Tomahawk. So today what we're going to be focusing on is going to be the Multo Tomahawk. But before I proceed with that, I will go ahead and show you both. And I will do a separate episode on each one. So this is the Multo. And this is the Yokai. Multo in Tagalog means ghost. So there is something to be said about the Multo in terms of the design, but also in terms of its intended use. This is meant to be, from what I understand of Ray, this is meant to be a little bit more of an EDC, which I think is quite interesting considering how formidable the design is. So a little background on Ray, and this is actually what got me interested in his design, is that he has a substantial military and law enforcement background and is also a trainer to military personnel. But what caught my attention was the fact that he has a substantial martial art background as well, specifically in Caballes Serrada, as well as Silat Dufian Beladiri. Caballes Serrada is very interesting because he trained under Vincent Caballes. Now, Angel Caballes, Angel Caballes, the Grandmaster of Caballes Serrada, was the training partner and travel companion of my father's instructor, Felicissimo Dizon. And Caballes Serrada, that style was very much about close quarter engagements, whereas my father's instructor, Felicissimo Dizon, although he had a very comprehensive curriculum which included Doce Pares, Doblete, and ultimately Mohara, he favored taller stances and longer distances, whereas Serrada preferred shorter stances and shorter distances. When Ray had told me that he trained directly under Vincent Caballes, I had to see what he had put together because he said that he had Caballes Serrada in mind when he created his Multo Tomahawk. And again, Multo in Tagalog means ghost. Nakakatakot naman ito eh. What I said in Tagalog is, this is a little scary. So, a few things that I want to point out about this Tomahawk. There is clear inspiration, and in my opinion, a bit of an homage to the Winkler R&D. And just a little bit of a tangent here. I've done a series of Winkler R&D videos. When you have an opportunity, do check out those series of videos. What I take from this respectful homage to the Winkler R&D is the fact that Filipino martial artists are researching our heritage and inventory of design, the rich inventory of design of Filipino martial weapons, modernizing it so that we now have access to their design. So as much as this is an homage to Tuhon Rafael Kayanan, who was responsible for the design of the legendary Winkler R&D style Tomahawk, this is also taking a far more direct design inspiration from the Igorot Tomahawk. You can clearly see it with a direct comparison. Now I'm going to go into the design aspect of it and the things that ultimately stand out. Remember, this was designed by a Serrada practitioner, meaning this is a stick-oriented methodology. So some things I want you to notice. Number one, the steel itself, for your information, is made of 0.22 inches of 8670 spring steel. So that's going to be a very strong steel. But this is the other thing I want you to think about. 0.22 inches, right? So it's relatively narrow in terms of its handling. It is full tank construction. But what makes it even lighter is the fact that there are holes through the handle. So this makes it a much lighter design. So the holes go from the very bottom and goes through the entire handle. So we're looking at about 6 holes altogether. And I have to say that the first time I picked it up, my hands immediately loved the handling of it, because the first thing I noticed was this is very light. For a tomahawk, this is very light. And this is very lively. In fact, this is the first tomahawk I've handled that seriously wants to move. This is very different from other tomahawks that I've handled because of its liveliness. Now, is that a good thing or a bad thing? It depends on the intended purpose. And because of the background of Ray Tirona, specific to Serrata and also Silat Dufyan Beladiri, that liveliness is a direct congruent interface with those two systems, Serrata and Silat Dufyan Beladiri. So a couple of things I want you to take a look at. We're going to take a look at the handle first, because that part is critical. So aside from the holes and the 0.22 inch of 8670 spring steel, so immediately the first thing you think is that this is a very light tool, and you feel it immediately. But there's other things too. The sectioning of the handle as well. You have this portion over here, which lends very well to largo mano, meaning long range fighting. Then you move up to the middle section here. So this is more sumbrada range, meaning more mid-range, and this is where the live hand, the checking hand, can start to do its work. You see this a lot in Serrata. Then you see the close quarters right here. And this is what I like to call your pistol grip. And this is what's called the corto range in Filipino martial arts, corto, or short range. This is when you do a lot of that short work and you're up in close. You might even be this close. So what you're looking at are the 3 primary ranges of Filipino martial arts. So what stands out to me about the handle? Aside from the tactile feel, which this is great. I just love that I have this tactile feel here. Aside from the ergonomics, there's something else that I want you to really pay attention to. It's these portions that actually stick out quite aggressively on these handles. Why is that important? Because when I switch from this grip and all of a sudden move my index finger right above it, so this now becomes a bit of an anchor point for my index finger. So what does this do? Normally with a tomahawk, because most tomahawks have a relatively smooth handle going for it, the majority of your pressure and the movement is going to come from the mechanoreceptors of the palm. And what happens is that this part of the palm sticks to the handle. So the majority of the movement is going to come from the shoulder, which is a very good place for the origination of that movement, is to come from the shoulder joint, because it is a multiplanar joint. But because of this, it's a bit of a bridge actually. It's almost like a ledge where my index finger can rest. I think you know where I'm going with this. So now I can actually release a little bit of those fingers and still have the security of the thumb and index. So now what happens with this tomahawk? It behaves more like a stick. This is so fast in its handling, because when I can all of a sudden relieve a little bit of this pressure, a few things start to happen. One of them is that I can give a little bit of a snap, just a little bit coming forward on the tomahawk. But now all of a sudden I can do a movement like this. Now I can do something like this. Because of its lightness and because of the holes and because of that narrow stock and this ledge, now all of a sudden it can move really quickly. Very, very quickly, which is much more in keeping with the kind of movements that you see in Serrata. That's the first thing I want you to notice. the handle. I think it's superb. For its intended purpose, really superb. The other thing I do want you to notice is now the head. This is the critical part, right? Because normally what we see on a tomahawk is that we have a very flat edge across. This is angled, as you can see, and then there's a bit of an indentation here. I like this indentation, and just by looking at it, it has just enough space because there is an opportunity so that when you catch a part of the target, when you catch a part of it, some of that target is going to rest into that indentation, so you can create some sort of friction control with this part of the tomahawk. I also suspect that a big part of this indentation, why that is there, is also to support the tip, both of which are aggressive on each side. I'm a little 50-50 on having an aggressive spike on the back because anything that comes back my way this way, it can present a danger to it. So as a personal preference, I'm not big on it. However, he was able, Ray, and the forge smith that he works with, Damon at Alpha Knife, was able to create it so that the angle here is such so this isn't a very aggressive spike. Aggressive enough, right? But there it's short enough here so that there's a way for it to be controllable. Meaning it's not this long spike sticking way out on this side so that even a small movement this way presents a danger to the practitioner. But it is sharp, so be mindful of this. But this one here has good hooking capabilities, good reverse spike capabilities here. This creates good punching and also some form of control because of that angle. Now let's take a look at what everybody has been paying attention to this whole time. That front spike design. Now that front spike design is from the original Igorot tribe headhunting axe. So what I want everybody to notice here is that not only is it relatively straight, it actually points up. So it kind of points up. And then you have this concave edge. And then right here, ever so subtly, it's very, very subtle, but not only does the concave edge subtly point out, this subtle pointing out of the angle allows the bottom part to hook, but also allows this to cut up. So the action that I'm going to be working with this tomahawk, the reverse spiking is going to be obvious. The punching is going to be obvious. The punching at this pistol grip is going to be obvious. But the cutting action is what's not going to be obvious because I won't necessarily hook with the front spike. What I'm going to do is an initial cut and then a cut up. Now that cut up shows another interesting feature of this tomahawk. This curved puño. This curved puño, the way I see it, the way I'd like to use it, is that after I cut with the front spike, cut up with that bottom edge of that concave edge, as I clear out of the target, I now have an impact weapon to come in this way, bit of an abanico, then I can hook and control. So there are a lot of very interesting features on this tomahawk for us to cover. And again, I like seeing this work from Ray because it takes direct inspiration from the headhunting axe of the Igorot tribe. I encourage all knife makers and tomahawk makers to take a look at the very large inventory of Filipino sword and knife design because I think it is very rich and untapped, and I think there's a big market for it, but also the very respectful homage to the legendary Winkler Sayok R&D Tomahawk, designed by Tuhon Rafael Kayanan of Sayok Kali and in collaboration with the legendary knife maker Daniel Winkler. So I can't wait to move with this, and I can't wait to share with you what I discover as I move with the Multo Tomahawk. Thank you for letting me share. I hope you enjoy this video.
To me, it's very clear based on the lightness and agility of Ray Tarona's Multo Tomahawk or Ghost Tomahawk takes a lot of its design considerations to accommodate the needs of the Kabbalist Serrata practitioner. It requires a lot of speed and agility with very simple wrist movements alone. The Kabbalist Serrata system is primarily a stick system whose overall strategy is very similar to the doubletic curriculum of his training partner, Felicissimo Dizon. So as a stick system, its primary idea is to check the hand, then to attack the elbow either underhand or abanico overhand, which ultimately leads to the torso via the liver. So this fundamental strategy is something that can be executed with a short stick very quickly with very quick flicks of the wrist. So as you can see, there's checking, abanicos, and ultimately to the torso. This is something that we can ultimately apply with the Ghost Tomahawk with only the slightest kinesthetic adjustments, but very little difference in terms of speed and overall agility. But I am applying the same exact drill and movement capabilities that I did with the stick, but now I'm using it with the Tomahawk. When I use it with the Tomahawk, I can use the handle, which is a full tank construction, to attack the arms. So the handle is a weapon also. So as I move with it, I can also use that rear spike that I was talking about, and I can also do that overhead abanico to attack the top of the elbow. Then I can proceed to the torso and attack the liver. So when you see this entire flow, it is actually very congruent with lead shoulder dynamics so that I can use some largo mano movements, but ultimately lead shoulder and square, lead shoulder and square. That's how agile and very versatile this Tomahawk happens to be. But let's take a look at some of that doblete serrata movements that I was talking about. Long range first, which then leads into the serrata movements that I was talking about. Very light, very agile, and very deadly. So as I start to move in with those serrata movements, note the hip hinge, note the square shoulder, but each of those strikes, although nimble and very quick, has something that is very lethal about it, and it has a lot to do with the concave edge that I mentioned earlier. Note the fluidity, note the ability to deliver on very fast strikes, but also really take note that that edge is going to be coming up very soon. I can only move this way because that edge is concave. So I can do a lot of those movements because that concave edge allows me to do several things. First of all, when I catch onto the limb, it sinks in a very different way, so it captures the entire portion. So then when I start to move this way, keep that in mind. But notice that once I start to extract, I can do several extractions. I can go ahead and do some extractions that makes it very clean. One that goes back but ultimately hooks, and then another one where I go forward. So there's a way for me to go ahead, penetrate, and then extract in this angle either forward or back. So I can go back or I can also go forward. This is a very unique design consideration by Ray Tarona, which allows this Tomahawk to move very fluidly but deliver a lot of sustainable damage. So right here, as I'm moving, I'm imagining myself, as Ray said, to train as if I'm going through some sort of enemy lines and I am in some sort of ship hallway and I'm going through one adversary after another from long range to short range, and then ultimately switching hands because I'm taking care of a lot of opponents as I go through this ship's hallway. Some of them are armored. This has been designed to go through all types of armor, but as you can see, the fluidity, changing of ranges, changing of grip transitions, without having to worry about extractions and being able to apply limb destructions and capturing capabilities. This is something that I really like about the Ghost Tomahawk. Take a look at how well it moves as I move from long range to short range with the Tomahawk. Very fluid, very easy to work with. There are a lot more videos that I'm putting together with regards to Ray Tarona's Ghost Tomahawk, and as you can see, I'm really having a lot of fun. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Stick around, stay tuned, more videos